He fought a war overseas, but his hardest battle is raising his daughter alone while living with scars the world can't see. When a powerful CEO offers him a second chance, hope flickers for the first time in years. But not everyone believes in him. Whispers spread. Is he a hero? Or just a broken man, being used for a company's image? He dares to trust, even to love again, until a hidden truth shatters everything. Now one choice will decide everything. Will he walk away from love forever, or prove that scars can tell a story of redemption? Can a broken soldier become the hero of his own life? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Jack Miller's hands trembled as he adjusted his tie for the 100th time in the cramped backstage area of the community center. The note cards in his grip were already wrinkled at the edges from his constant fidgeting. Each breath felt heavy in his chest as he tried to remember the breathing exercises his therapist had taught him. The backstage mirror reflected a man he barely recognized, clean-shaven, wearing a dark blue suit that felt too stiff, too formal. His military medals, pinned carefully to his lapel, caught the dim light. They felt like lead weights dragging him down. "Dad, you're gonna do great." Emma's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. His 13-year-old daughter stood beside him, her brown eyes full of that unwavering faith that sometimes scared him. She reached up to straighten his tie, even though it didn't need fixing. "Just pretend you're telling me one of your stories, like you do at bedtime." Jack managed a weak smile. "This is different, kiddo. There's going to be hundreds of people out there." "So what?" Emma's chin lifted in that stubborn way she'd inherited from her mother. "They're just people who want to help veterans like you. They're on your side." The muffled sounds of the crowd filtered through the heavy curtain. Jack's pulse quickened. Maybe this was a mistake. I'm not good at public speaking. I should have just written a letter or something. "Dad." Emma's voice took on that tone she used when she thought he was being ridiculous. "You promised Mrs. Henderson you'd speak. The fundraiser needs a real veteran's perspective." "Your perspective." Jack closed his eyes, remembering the kind, elderly woman who ran the local veterans support group. She'd asked him personally, said his story could make a difference. "I know, but—" "No buts." Emma took the note cards from his hands, smoothed them out and handed them back. "You always tell me to face my fears. Remember when I was scared to try out for the school play? That's different." "How?" Jack looked down at his daughter, seeing the strength in her young face. Sometimes he forgot who was supporting whom in their little family of two. "When did you get so wise?" "Someone had to." She grinned, then grew serious. "Dad, you're the bravest person I know. Not just because of what you did in the war, but because you keep trying every day. That's what real courage is." A stagehand appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Miller, 5 minutes." Jack's throat went dry. He looked down at his note cards, the words swimming before his eyes. The speech was simple enough. Thank the donors, share a few carefully chosen stories about his service, emphasize the importance of supporting veterans' mental health programs. But standing in front of all those people, Emma squeezed his hand. "I'll be right in the front row. Just look at me if you get nervous." Jack pulled her into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I don't deserve you, kiddo." "Yeah, you do." She pulled back and straightened his medals one last time. "These show what you did for our country, but I'm proud of you for what you do every single day. Being my dad, helping other vets, trying to get better." The stagehand returned. "Mr. Miller, they're ready for you." Jack took a deep breath and nodded. Emma gave him one last encouraging smile before slipping through the curtain to take her seat. He could hear the MC introducing him, listing his military accomplishments, the medals he'd earned. Each word made his chest tighter. The spotlight hit him as he walked onto the stage. The audience was a blur of faces, hundreds of eyes watching him. His palms were sweating as he gripped the podium. "Good evening," he managed, his voice rougher than he intended. I'm Jack Miller." He looked down at his note cards, trying to focus on the words. The spotlight felt too bright, too hot, like the desert sun in Afghanistan, like the flash before an explosion. "No, not here, not now." He forced himself to continue. "I served 2 tours in Afghanistan with the Army Rangers. I'm here tonight to talk about—" The words blurred. Someone coughed in the audience, and he flinched. The sound was too much like distant gunfire. His hands gripped the podium harder. "To talk about The spotlight intensified, and suddenly he was back there. The heat, the sand, the screams of his men, the metals on his chest burned like fire. The silence in the hall grew heavy, expectant. He could feel the weight of all those stares. His breath came in short gasps. Sweat trickled down his back. The word came out as a whisper. I'm sorry. The note card slipped from his trembling fingers, scattering across the stage. He stood frozen, exposed, humiliated. The silence stretched on, forever. In the front row, he could see Emma's worried face, and that made it even worse. He'd failed her, failed everyone. Then, through the crushing silence, a single sound cut through, the sharp, clear ring of someone clapping. Just one person. But the sound was decisive, almost defiant. A woman stood up in the middle of the audience. Even through his panic, Jack couldn't help but notice her presence. She wore a tailored business suit, her posture straight and confident. But it was her expression that caught him. Not pity, but something else. Understanding, maybe? Recognition? She continued clapping, the sound echoing through the hall. Jack stood there, his heart pounding, as Claire Donovan, though he didn't know her name yet, met his gaze with unwavering certainty, as if she saw something in him that he himself had forgotten existed. The cool evening air did little to ease the burning shame that wrapped around Jack Miller like a suffocating blanket. He sat on the concrete steps outside the community center, his head buried in his trembling hands. The sound of crickets chirping in the nearby bushes mixed with the muffled voices still drifting from inside the building. His tie hung loose around his neck, and sweat dampened the back of his dress shirt despite the mild temperature. Emma's small arms wrapped around his broad shoulders, her touch gentle but firm. "Dad, it's okay," she whispered, pressing her cheek against his back. "Nobody expects you to be perfect." Jack's jaw clenched tight. "Let's just go home, sweetheart." His voice came out rough, scratchy. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. Those faces in the crowd, all those expectant looks turning to pity, would haunt him for weeks. "But Dad," Emma started to protest. "Please, Emma." He didn't mean to snap, but the words came out sharper than intended. He softened his tone. I need to get out of here." The sound of heels clicking against concrete made Jack tense. He didn't want to face anyone right now, especially not whoever had tried to salvage his humiliation with that lonely applause. "Mr. Miller?" The voice was warm, confident, but gentle. Jack reluctantly lifted his head to see a tall woman in an elegant black dress standing a few feet away. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her expression held none of the pity he dreaded. "I'm Claire Donovan," she said, maintaining a respectful distance. "I wanted to tell you how moved I was by your courage up there." Jack let out a harsh laugh. "Courage? Ma'am, what you saw was a complete breakdown." "What I saw," Claire countered firmly, "was a man willing to face his demons in front of hundreds of people. That takes more bravery than most people possess." Emma's arms tightened around him, and Jack felt her nod against his shoulder. "She's right, Dad." Claire took a careful step closer, her movements measured as if approaching a wounded animal. "Mr. Miller, I don't make a habit of empty flattery. When I say something, I mean it." She paused, studying him with clear, intelligent eyes. "That's why I'd like to make you an offer." Jack straightened slightly, wariness creeping into his expression. "What kind of offer?" "I'm the CEO of Donovan Industries," Claire explained, smoothing her dress as she gracefully sat down on the step, keeping a respectful distance. "We're launching a new veteran outreach initiative, and we need someone with real experience to help lead it. Someone who understands firsthand what our veterans face." Jack's brow furrowed. "With all due respect, Ms. Donovan, I don't need charity." "This isn't charity, Mr. Miller." Claire's voice carried absolute conviction. "This is business. We need someone who can connect with veterans. Someone they'll trust. Someone authentic." She gestured toward the community center. "What happened in there? That raw honesty? That's exactly what we need." Jack shook his head, his fingers absently touching the metals on his lapel. "I couldn't even finish a simple speech." "Dad." Emma's voice was quiet but determined. She moved to sit beside him, her young face serious. "Remember what you always tell me? That being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing something even when you are scared? Claire smiled warmly at Emma. Your daughter is very wise, Mr. Miller. She gets that from her mother, Jack said softly, giving Emma's hand a gentle squeeze. Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, holding it out to Jack. The position would involve working with veteran support programs, coordinating with VA hospitals, and helping develop employment opportunities for returning service members. Full benefits, of course, and flexible hours to accommodate any appointments or family obligations. Jack stared at the card, his mind racing with possibilities and doubts. The practical side of him knew this could be a real opportunity, better than the construction work he'd been doing. But the wounded part of him, the part that still woke up in cold sweats, wanted to run. Emma leaned close to his ear, her whisper full of hope. Dad, maybe this is a chance. Jack looked at his daughter's encouraging face, then back at Claire's extended hand. The woman's steady gaze held no judgment, no pity, only professional respect, and something that looked like genuine understanding. With a deep breath, Jack reached out and shook Claire's hand. Her grip was firm, confident, matching the smile that spread across her face. Welcome to Donovan Industries, Mr. Miller, she said, releasing his hand. We'll start Monday if that works for you. Jack nodded, surprised to feel a small spark of hope flickering in his chest. Yes, ma'am. Monday works fine. Jack stood in the gleaming lobby of Donovan Enterprises, feeling like a fish out of water. The marble floors reflected the morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, making him squint. His weathered brown leather jacket, though clean and presentable, stood in stark contrast to the parade of crisp suits and designer briefcases flowing around him. He adjusted his collar self-consciously, the starched fabric of his one good shirt feeling stiff against his neck. The receptionist behind the curved desk eyed him with barely concealed skepticism as he approached. I'm here to see Claire Donovan, Jack said, his voice steady despite his discomfort. Jack Miller. The receptionist's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. One moment, please. She picked up her phone, speaking in hushed tones. Jack shifted his weight from one foot to the other, acutely aware of the curious glances from people passing through the lobby. His combat boots, though polished, seemed to echo too loudly on the pristine floor. Emma had insisted on shining them herself this morning, her face full of determination as she worked. Mr. Miller? A young man in a navy suit appeared at his elbow. I'm Derek from HR. Please follow me. The elevator ride to the 20th floor was silent, except for Derek's rapid typing on his phone. Jack focused on his breathing, using the techniques his therapist had taught him. The confined space made his pulse quicken, but he kept his expression neutral. They emerged into a maze of glass-walled offices and open workspaces. Modern art adorned the walls, and the buzz of conversation mixed with the gentle whir of expensive coffee machines. A group of employees gathered around a water cooler fell silent as Jack passed, their eyes taking in his scars before quickly looking away. This will be your desk, Derek said, gesturing to a workstation near a window. Standard orientation materials are on the computer. I'll need you to fill out some forms. He placed a thick stack of papers on the desk, his manner efficient but distant. A woman in a pencil skirt paused at the adjacent cubicle, coffee cup in hand. Is this the new hire for the veteran program? She asked Derek, speaking as if Jack wasn't there. Yes, this is Mr. Miller. He'll be working with Ms. Donovan directly on the initiative. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. How interesting. I'm Sandra from marketing. We're all very excited about this program. It's going to make such great PR. Jack's jaw tightened. Before he could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Jack, you're here early. Claire Donovan strode toward them, her presence commanding yet warm. She wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Jack's monthly rent, but her smile was genuine. I see you've met some of the team. Sandra straightened, her demeanor shifting instantly. Ms. Donovan, I was just welcoming our new colleague. Wonderful, Claire said, though something in her tone suggested she'd overheard more than Sandra might have wished. Jack, would you join me in my office? We have work to do. Claire's corner office was surprisingly understated, with comfortable leather chairs and photos of what looked like charity projects on the walls. She gestured for Jack to sit. I hope the welcome wagon wasn't too overwhelming, she said, settling behind her desk. I faced worse, Jack replied, allowing himself a small smile. Claire nodded, pulling out a folder. I've been reviewing your military record, with your permission, of course. Your experience, leading special ops teams, coordinating complex missions, mentoring new recruits. It's exactly what we need. Jack frowned slightly. For PR photos? For this? Claire spread several documents across her desk. We're launching a comprehensive veteran support initiative. Not just job placement, though that's part of it, but a complete mentorship and transition program. Who better to design it than someone who's lived it? She pushed the papers toward him. These are the basic frameworks we've developed, but they're missing the practical elements. The real-world understanding of what veterans actually need, not what corporations think they need. That's where you come in. Jack studied the documents, his tactical mind already noting gaps and opportunities. This wasn't busy work or a charity position. This was real responsibility, the chance to make actual change. You want me to design this? He asked, looking up at Claire. I want you to make it work, she replied firmly. You'll have resources, support staff, whatever you need. But you'll be leading this, Jack, because you understand both sides, the military world and the civilian one. You know the challenges firsthand. Jack sat back, processing her words. For the first time since walking into the building, his shoulders relaxed slightly. A familiar feeling stirred in his chest, the same one he'd felt before missions, when everything clicked into place. Purpose, direction. When do we start? He asked. Claire's smile widened. We already have. The office 2 doors down is yours when you're ready. Take today to review everything. Make notes. Start forming your team. I've cleared my schedule for tomorrow morning to hear your initial thoughts. She stood, extending her hand across the desk. Welcome aboard, Jack. Really. As Jack shook her hand, he felt something he hadn't expected to find in this towering glass building. Hope. Small and cautious, but definitely there. The cafeteria buzzed with the typical lunch hour crowd. A sea of pressed suits and polished shoes. Jack sat alone at a corner table, picking at his sandwich while trying to ignore the occasional curious glances thrown his way. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, reminding him uncomfortably of the fundraiser's spotlights. His morning had been productive enough. Claire had given him a stack of veteran employment statistics to review, and he'd already started drafting some practical ideas for the outreach program. But now, surrounded by corporate chatter and the clink of expensive ceramic coffee cups, his earlier confidence wavered. 2 young executives settled at the table behind him, their voices carrying despite their attempts at whispered conversation. Jack kept his head down, but their words cut through the cafeteria noise with painful clarity. Did you see the new hire in operations? The first voice asked, female, and dripping with gossip, ready enthusiasm. The veteran. Hard to miss those scars, the second voice replied, male and dismissive. Classic PR move, if you ask me. Jack's hand stilled on his sandwich. His jaw clenched. I heard Claire Donovan hired him straight from some charity event, the woman continued. Perfect timing, too, with the shareholders pushing for more community involvement. Well, it's brilliant, really, her companion chuckled. Hire one damaged war hero, get tons of positive press. The board must be thrilled. The sandwich crumpled in Jack's grip, his knuckles white. The familiar heat of rage rose in his chest, mixed with a sickening wave of humiliation. Of course that's what this was. He'd been a fool to think otherwise. I mean, what does he know about corporate operations? The man went on, oblivious to Jack's mounting tension. But I guess that's not the point, right? He just needs to look good in press photos. Jack's combat-honed instincts screamed at him, to turn around, to confront them, to defend his dignity. But the deeper wound was the truth he heard in their words. He was a prop, a publicity stunt. The realization sat like lead in his stomach. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The conversation behind him stuttered to a halt as he gathered his half-eaten lunch with mechanical movements. He could feel their eyes on him now, could practically taste their embarrassment at being overheard. He didn't give them the satisfaction of acknowledgement. Walking to the trash bin, he dumped his lunch with controlled precision. His footsteps echoed in his ears as he left the cafeteria, each step carrying him further from the whispers but closer to a crushing certainty. He didn't belong here. Back at his desk, Jack's fingers flew over his keyboard, typing out a resignation letter. The words came easily, too easily, perhaps. Thank you for the opportunity. Personal reasons. Effective immediately. His cursor hovered over the send button, but something held him back. Emma's voice echoed in his head. Dad, maybe this is a chance. He saved the draft instead, then began methodically packing his few personal items into his worn leather messenger bag. The small framed photo of Emma, a spare phone charger, the notebook Claire had given him that morning, embossed with the company logo. His hands paused on the notebook, remembering how she'd smiled when she handed it to him, how her eyes had held genuine warmth. But that warmth felt hollow now, just another part of the performance. He'd been reading it all wrong, seeing what he wanted to see. The thought stung more than he cared to admit. The office had begun to empty for the day, the usual end-of-day bustle providing cover for his retreat. Jack shouldered his bag, took one last look at his desk, his first and last day in corporate America. He'd survived worse, much worse. He made it halfway down the corridor before a familiar voice stopped him. "Jack, where are you going?" Claire stood in the hallway, elegant in her charcoal suit, concern etched across her features. Her heels clicked against the marble as she approached, each step deliberate. Jack's grip tightened on his bag strap. "I think we both know this was a mistake." "No," Claire said firmly. "I don't know that at all." She gestured to a nearby conference room. "Please, hear me out before you walk away." The sincerity in her voice made him hesitate. It would be easier to leave, to retreat to familiar territory where expectations were clear and disappointment was a known quantity. But something in her expression, a flash of vulnerability beneath the corporate polish, made him pause. Jack stood frozen in the hallway, caught between flight and the faintest glimmer of hope. Claire waited, her hand still extended toward the conference room door, offering not demands, but a choice. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and uncertain possibilities. Finally, Jack adjusted his bag on his shoulder and took a step toward the conference room. He'd faced down worse fears than this. He could at least hear what she had to say. Claire's relief was visible as she reached for the door handle. Whatever came next would determine if this truly was an ending or something else entirely. Claire's office felt different in the late afternoon light. The usual stark corporate atmosphere had softened, shadows stretching across the polished hardwood floors. Jack stood rigid near the door, his hand still gripping the strap of his messenger bag, ready to bolt. "Please," Claire gestured to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. "Just give me 5 minutes." Jack hesitated, his jaw tight. The weight of the overheard gossip sat heavy in his chest, mixing with familiar feelings of betrayal and inadequacy. But something in Claire's voice, a slight tremor he'd never heard before, made him stay. He lowered himself into the chair, keeping his back straight. Claire didn't return to her seat behind the imposing desk. Instead, she walked to the wall of windows overlooking the city, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. Her usual confident posture had softened, and she wrapped her arms around herself in an uncharacteristically vulnerable gesture. "I heard what happened in the cafeteria," she said quietly. "About what they were saying." "Save it," Jack cut in, his voice rough. "I don't need your explanations or your pity. I've had enough of being someone's good deed for the day." Claire turned to face him, and Jack was surprised to see her eyes glistening. "This isn't about pity, Jack. Or PR." She moved to a small table near her desk and picked up a silver frame Jack hadn't noticed before. Her fingers traced the edge before she handed it to him. The photo showed a young man in military dress uniform, his smile bright and confident. The family resemblance was unmistakable, the same determined set of the jaw, the same direct gaze. "My brother, Michael," Claire said softly. "He was stationed in Afghanistan. 3 years ago, Her voice caught, and she took a moment to steady herself. "He didn't come home." Jack's grip on the frame tightened. The familiar weight of loss pressed against his chest, not just his own now, but a recognition of it in someone else. He looked up at Claire with new eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it. Claire sank into the chair next to him rather than returning behind her desk. "Michael believed in service, in making a difference. He used to tell me that the corporate world I lived in wasn't the real world." A sad smile touched her lips. "He said I needed to get out of my tower and do something that mattered." She leaned forward, her eyes meeting Jack's directly. "When I saw you at that fundraiser, I saw something I recognized. Not just pain or struggle, but strength. The kind of strength Michael had. The kind that keeps going even when it feels impossible." Jack's throat tightened. He remembered Emma's face in the audience at the fundraiser, how she'd looked at him with such pride even as he faltered. "It's not strength sometimes," he said roughly. Sometimes it's just not knowing what else to do. That's exactly what strength is, Claire replied. And when I offered you this position, it wasn't about making the company look good. It was about honoring what Michael believed in, that we all have a responsibility to make a difference where we can. She stood and walked to her desk, pulling out a folder. This veteran outreach program? It's not window dressing. I've been planning it since Michael died. Look. She handed Jack the folder filled with detailed proposals, budget plans, and implementation strategies dating back years. I needed someone who understood both worlds, military and civilian. Someone who could make it real, not just another corporate initiative. Jack leafed through the papers, seeing the care and thought put into each aspect. His anger began to fade, replaced by a complicated mix of emotions he couldn't quite sort out. Those people in the cafeteria, Claire continued, they don't know about Michael. I don't talk about him here. Maybe that's been a mistake. She paused, running a hand through her hair. But I'm telling you because I need you to understand. This isn't charity, Jack. This is about building something meaningful, something that might help other veterans find their way back. Jack closed the folder slowly, studying Claire's face. The polished CEO facade had cracked, showing something real underneath. Grief, determination, and a sincerity he couldn't deny. He thought about walking away, about how easy it would be to retreat back into his shell of distrust and isolation. But he also thought about Emma's words that morning. Dad, you're different when you're working on this program, like you used to be. I'm not promising anything, he said finally, his voice gruff. And I'm not here to be anyone's replacement brother. I would never ask you to be, Claire replied quietly. I'm asking you to be a partner in building something that matters. Jack stood, adjusting the strap of his bag. The anger that had driven him to pack up his desk had subsided, replaced by a cautious respect for the woman before him. He still felt wary, the old instinct to protect himself warring with the pull of purpose he'd felt while working on the program. I'll stay, he said, for now. But no more surprises. Claire nodded, relief visible in the slight relaxation of her shoulders. Thank you, she said simply. As Jack turned to leave, he paused at the door. Your brother, he said, not looking back. He was right about getting out of the tower. He stepped into the hallway, letting the door close behind him. His emotions churned. Doubt still lingered, but alongside it was something else. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of it. He headed toward the elevator, his steps slower now, more measured. The program folders weighed heavy in his bag, but it was a different kind of weight than before. Not a burden of obligation, but the weight of possibility. The kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of simmering tomato sauce and garlic bread warming in the oven. Jack stirred the pot of pasta sauce mechanically, his mind still replaying the conversation with Claire from earlier that afternoon. The wooden spoon scraped against the bottom of the pot in a steady rhythm that matched his troubled thoughts. And then Sarah totally bombed her presentation because she forgot her notes at home. Emma continued from her perch at the kitchen counter, swinging her legs as she detailed her day at school. Her backpack and scattered homework lay forgotten beside her. But Mrs. Thompson let her try again after lunch, which was really nice. Dad, are you listening? Jack blinked, forcing himself back to the present. Of course I am. Sarah forgot her notes. Emma rolled her eyes good-naturedly. That was like 5 minutes ago. I've told you 3 other stories since then. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the counter. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, studied him intently. So, how was your first real day at the new job? Jack tested the pasta with a fork, buying himself a moment before answering. The truth was complicated. Claire's revelation about her brother had shifted something inside him, but the sting of the overheard gossip still burned. He didn't want to burden Emma with his doubts, not when she'd been so excited about this opportunity. He paused, draining the pasta into a colander. Steam billowed up, fogging the window above the sink. It's different, but maybe good. Different how? Emma pressed, helping him gather plates and silverware for the table. Did you meet nice people? What's Claire like as a boss? Do you have your own office? Jack had to smile at her enthusiasm. Slow down, kiddo. One question at a time. He spooned sauce over the pasta, adding a sprinkle of Parmesan the way Emma liked it. The office is fancy, lots of glass and chrome. Very different from what I'm used to. But that's exciting, right? Emma set out napkins with careful precision, It's like starting fresh. A whole new chapter. Jack carried their plates to the table, considering his words carefully. Sometimes new isn't easy, Em. There's a lot to learn, a lot to adjust to. Is that why you look worried? Emma's perception cut straight through his defenses, as usual. Did something happen today? Jack sank into his chair, rubbing his temple where a headache was forming. Nothing bad, exactly. Just complicated adult stuff. Work politics, you know? Emma nodded sagely, though Jack doubted she fully understood. She bowed her head, folding her hands for grace. A habit she'd maintained even when Jack's own faith had wavered after returning from deployment. "Dear God," she began, her young voice clear and earnest in their small kitchen. "Thank you for this food, and for Dad's cooking, even though he burns the garlic bread sometimes." She paused, peeking one eye open at him with a grin. "Thank you especially for giving Dad something new. A new job, new people to help, and maybe new friends too. Please, help him see all the good things ahead, even when they're hard to spot. Amen." Jack's throat tightened unexpectedly. "Amen," he echoed softly, watching as Emma dug into her pasta with typical teenage enthusiasm. Her simple prayer hit him harder than she probably realized. She wasn't just excited about this job. She was hopeful, desperate even, for him to embrace something beyond their careful, isolated routine. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Emma spoke again. "Dad?" Her fork pushed pasta around her plate in absent patterns. "I know you probably don't want to talk about what happened at the fundraiser, but I was really proud of you for trying, and I think it's brave that you're giving this job a chance." Jack set down his fork, studying his daughter's earnest face. When had she gotten so wise? Sometimes he forgot she wasn't that same little girl who used to need him to check under the bed for monsters. Now she was the one checking on him, in her own way. "Thanks, Em," he managed, his voice rougher than usual. "I'm trying." "I know you are." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand, his scarred one, without hesitation. "That's all that matters." Jack squeezed back, remembering Claire's words from earlier about resilience and honor. Maybe Emma and Claire both saw something in him he couldn't quite see in himself yet. His daughter's unwavering faith in him, her eager prayers for his future, it humbled him, made him want to be worthy of that faith. "So," Emma said brightly, returning to her dinner, "are you going to tell me about your fancy new office or what? Does it have one of those cool spinning chairs?" Jack chuckled, grateful for her ability to lighten any moment. "Actually, I share a workspace with other program coordinators, but the chair does spin." "Awesome! Way better than your old desk in the garage." Emma's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Maybe someday you can show me where you work. I bet the view is amazing from up high in that building." "Maybe," Jack agreed, watching his daughter's animated gestures as she continued chattering about all the possibilities his new job might bring. Her optimism was infectious, even through his lingering doubts. She wanted so badly for this to be a positive change, not just for him, but for them both. The simple dinner table scene struck him suddenly. His daughter's eager face in the warm kitchen light, her hopeful prayers, her unwavering support. She was ready for him to move forward, had been ready for a while now. Maybe it was time he caught up with her courage. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass doors of Donovan Industries as Jack strode into the lobby. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor with newfound purpose. The security guard, Mike, gave him a friendly nod, a far cry from the wary glances of his first day. "Morning, Mr. Miller," the young receptionist called out cheerfully. "Morning, Jenny," Jack replied with a small smile. After a week at the company, faces had become familiar, and the initial stiffness in his shoulders had begun to ease. His new routine felt good, different, but good. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Jack stepped in, pressing the button for the 14th floor. As he adjusted his tie, still not quite comfortable with corporate attire, he allowed himself to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, this new chapter wasn't as impossible as he'd first thought. The elevator opened onto his floor, and Jack turned left toward his office. That's when he saw it, mounted prominently on the wall near the break room, impossible to miss. A framed newspaper article with a bold headline that made his stomach lurch. "Corporate Angel. CEO Claire Donovan gives hope to broken veteran." Jack's feet froze mid-step. There, beneath the headline, was a photo of him from the fundraiser, captured mid-breakdown on stage. Next to it, A smaller photo showed Claire looking poised and compassionate. The article's opening paragraph jumped out at him like an accusation. In a touching display of corporate responsibility, CEO Claire Donovan has extended a helping hand to decorated but troubled veteran Jack Miller, offering him a chance at redemption through her company's innovative outreach program. Blood rushed to Jack's face as his eyes scanned the rest of the article. Phrases jumped out like physical blows. Shell-shocked veteran, emotional breakdown, corporate salvation. Each word stripped away another layer of his dignity. Colleagues passing by gave him concerned looks as he stood there, hands clenched at his sides. Someone touched his shoulder, probably meant to be friendly, but Jack jerked away. "Hey Jack, isn't it great? Ms. Donovan's getting recognition for the program," a well-meaning coworker said. Jack couldn't respond. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the corridor too narrow. The article blurred before his eyes as memories of his breakdown at the fundraiser crashed over him. Now, immortalized in print, his vulnerability turned into a PR opportunity. Everything made sense now. The job offer, Claire's personal attention, her story about her brother, all carefully orchestrated steps in crafting the perfect redemption story. His daughter's words echoed mockingly in his head. Maybe this is a chance. Yeah, a chance for Claire to boost her corporate image. Without conscious thought, his feet carried him down the hallway toward Claire's office. Her assistant rose from her desk, startled by his expression. "Mr. Miller, Ms. Donovan is in a meet." Jack pushed past her and threw open Claire's office door. Claire sat at her desk with two other executives, her elegant composure faltering at his sudden entrance. "Jack, what's wrong? What's wrong?" His voice came out low and dangerous. The other executives exchanged glances and quickly gathered their papers. "What's wrong is that you've turned me into your pet project." Claire's face showed genuine confusion. "I don't understand." "The article, Claire. The one you had framed and mounted like a trophy. Corporate Angel Saves Broken Veteran. Is that what I am to you? A broken toy you can fix to make yourself look good?" Understanding dawned on Claire's face, followed by horror. "Jack, no. I had nothing to do with that article. I would never—" "Save it." Jack's voice cracked with emotion. "I trusted you. I actually believed you saw me as a person, not just another charity case. I let my daughter believe in you." Claire stood up, her face pale. "Please, Jack, listen to me. That article wasn't my doing. I'm having it taken down immediately. I would never exploit." "You know what the worst part is?" Jack cut her off, his voice thick with betrayal. "I actually started to think, to hope." He shook his head sharply. "Doesn't matter now. I was stupid to believe any of it was real." "Jack, please." Claire moved around her desk, reaching out to him, but Jack was already turning away, his trust shattered like glass. He yanked the door open, leaving Claire standing alone in her office, her outstretched hand falling helplessly to her side. As he stormed through the hallway, employees scattered out of his path. The framed article seemed to mock him as he passed. 7 days ago, he'd let himself believe in new beginnings. Now, he knew better. Some things really were too broken to fix. The elevator doors closed behind him with a final, decisive click. The wooden porch swing creaked softly as Jack rocked back and forth, the evening air cooling his heated skin. Through the window behind him, the warm glow of the kitchen lights spilled out, and he could hear Emma's pencil scratching against paper as she worked on her math homework. The familiar sounds should have been comforting, but tonight they only highlighted his inner turmoil. His fingers traced the rough edge of the newspaper article he'd torn from the wall, now crumpled in his pocket. He couldn't stop thinking about those words. Broken veteran. The phrase burned in his mind like acid. Jack pulled the wrinkled paper out, staring at Claire's photo beside his own. Her smile looked so genuine, her eyes warm and sincere as she stood next to him at the fundraiser. Had it all been an act? A carefully orchestrated PR stunt? "You're being paranoid again, Miller," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. But wasn't paranoia what had kept him alive in combat? Wasn't distrust just good sense after everything he'd seen? The porch light flickered on automatically as darkness settled in. A moth fluttered nearby, drawn to the artificial brightness. Jack watched it dance around the bulb, remembering how he'd felt drawn to Claire's light. Her strength, her. No, he couldn't go there. The screen door squeaked, and Emma's voice drifted out. "Dad? Want some hot chocolate?" "Not tonight, sweetie. Just finishing some work thoughts." You mean brooding thoughts, she corrected, but didn't push further. The door clicked shut softly behind her. Jack's chest tightened. Emma knew him too well. She'd been so excited about his new job, about seeing him try to move forward. Now he'd have to tell her he was quitting. Again. But Claire's face kept floating back into his mind. The way she'd looked at him that first day, not with pity, but with recognition. How she'd trusted him with real responsibility. The story about her brother. Had that been manipulation too? Jack wanted to believe it wasn't. Something in his gut told him Claire's pain over her brother had been real. The way her voice had cracked when she spoke about him. How her hands had trembled slightly. Stop it, he growled at himself. He'd learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Back in the sandbox, the friendliest faces sometimes hid the deadliest intentions. But this wasn't a war zone, and Claire wasn't the enemy, no matter how much his defensive instincts wanted to paint her as one. Jack closed his eyes, remembering their conversation in her office last week. The vulnerability in her expression when she'd talked about her brother. The way her perfume had smelled like vanilla and something else he couldn't quite place. How his heart had quickened when she'd stepped closer. Damn it, he whispered, standing up abruptly. The porch swing rattled behind him as he paced the wooden boards. This was exactly why he needed to leave. These feelings, this attraction, it was clouding his judgment. Claire was his boss, a CEO with an agenda. She had shareholders to please, a company image to maintain. And he was just a convenience story, a broken soldier she could fix to make herself look good, wasn't he? The night air carried the scent of Mrs. Peterson's jasmine from next door. It reminded him of the flowers Claire always had on her desk, fresh ones, every Monday. He'd noticed that detail without meaning to, just like he'd noticed how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, or how her eyes crinkled at the corners when she really smiled. Jack slumped back onto the porch swing, defeated. Who was he kidding? He'd been noticing everything about Claire Donovan, storing away little details like precious gems. Even now, angry and hurt, he couldn't stop thinking about her. I can't trust her, he whispered to the night air, his voice rough with emotion. But why does my heart keep saying otherwise? The moths continued their dance around the porch light, drawn inexorably to its warmth despite the danger. Jack watched them, understanding their struggle all too well. His head told him to run, to protect himself from more pain and betrayal. But his heart whispered of possibilities, of second chances, of a woman whose strength matched his own, whose pain echoed his, and whose smile made him feel more alive than he had in years. The screen door creaked again. Dad? Emma called softly. It's getting late. Be right in, he replied, his voice hoarse. Jack stood, shoving the crumpled article back into his pocket. Tomorrow, he'd have to decide, trust or retreat, risk or safety, possibility or certainty. But for tonight, he let himself linger in the space between, where hope and fear danced together like moths around a flame. Monday morning arrived with a fresh layer of tension in the office. Jack's footsteps echoed through the hallway as he made his way to the conference room, his jaw set tight. The newspaper article still burned in his mind, but he had bills to pay and Emma's future to think about. He couldn't quit. Not yet. Claire was already there, standing by the window with a stack of folders in her arms. She turned when he entered, and for a moment, their eyes met. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Good morning, Jack, she said finally, her voice professional but gentle. Please, have a seat. He nodded stiffly and chose a chair far from where she stood. What's this about? Claire placed a folder in front of him. We're launching the youth mentorship program next week. I need you to co-lead it with me. Jack's fingers tightened on the armrest. With you? Yes. She met his gaze steadily. These kids need someone who understands their struggles. Someone real. And you need good PR, he couldn't help adding. Claire's shoulders tensed, but her voice remained calm. The program needs both of us, Jack. You have the experience these kids can relate to, and I have the resources to make it happen. Jack flipped through the folder, scanning the profiles of troubled teens, kids from broken homes, foster care, and juvenile detention. His heart squeezed despite himself. These were the kids who reminded him of himself before the military gave him purpose. 3 afternoons a week, Claire continued. We'll work with groups of 5 to 7 kids at a time. The first session is tomorrow. I don't have a choice in this, do I? You always have a choice. Claire's voice softened. But these kids deserve a chance, don't you think? Jack looked down at the profiles again, at the young faces trying to look tough for their photos. He thought of Emma, how different her life could have been without support and love. Fine, he said finally. But I do this my way. Agreed. The next day, Jack arrived early at the community center. The room was bright and informal, with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. He paced, checking his watch repeatedly until the first teenagers began to shuffle in. They came in like wary animals, heads down, shoulders hunched, testing the waters. 5 boys and 2 girls, none older than 16. Jack recognized the look in their eyes. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough, the look that said they'd been hurt too many times to trust easily. Claire arrived just as the last teen took a seat. She wore casual clothes instead of her usual business attire, jeans and a simple blue sweater that made her look more approachable. Jack tried not to notice how it brought out the warmth in her eyes. "Welcome, everyone," Claire began, but was cut off by a snort from one of the boys, a lanky kid with a scar above his eyebrow. "What's this supposed to be? Another rich lady trying to fix us?" The boy's voice dripped with cynicism. Before Claire could respond, Jack stepped forward. Something about the kid's defiance struck a chord in him. "No," he said firmly. "This isn't about fixing anyone. We're here to talk about scars." The boy's eyes narrowed. "What do you know about scars?" Jack didn't hesitate. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the web of burn marks that covered his forearm. The room fell silent. "I got these pulling my buddy out of a burning Humvee in Afghanistan," he said quietly. "He didn't make it. These scars remind me every day that I'm alive for a reason." The boy's tough facade cracked slightly. He touched his own scar unconsciously. How do you deal with people staring?" "I used to hide them," Jack admitted. "Wore long sleeves even in summer. But then my daughter told me something smart. She said these scars prove I'm stronger than whatever tried to break me." A girl in the back raised her hand hesitantly. "I have scars too," she whispered. "Not on the outside, but—" Jack nodded. "Those are the ones that hurt the most, aren't they? But they're also the ones that can make us understand others better." The boy with the scar leaned forward. "Were you scared? In the war?" "Every day," Jack said honestly. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going anyway." One by one, the teens began to open up. They shared stories of foster homes, of parents who disappeared, of fights and fears and dreams they'd given up on. Jack listened, offering no judgment, just understanding nods and occasional words of encouragement. From her spot near the window, Claire watched silently. She saw how naturally Jack connected with these kids, how his honesty drew out theirs. His walls were down now, his anger forgotten in the face of their need. The afternoon sun caught the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both pain and kindness. The boy with the scar, who had introduced himself as Marcus, stayed behind after the session. He approached Jack awkwardly, scuffing his shoes on the floor. "Hey, will you be here next time too?" Jack's expression softened. "Yeah, kid. I'll be here." Marcus nodded, relief visible on his young face. "Cool, because I got other scars I want to talk about, if that's okay." "It's more than okay," Jack said. And Claire saw how his hand instinctively reached out to squeeze the boy's shoulder. The same gesture he often used with Emma. Marcus left with a small smile, the first they'd seen from him all afternoon. The room felt different now, charged with the echo of shared pain and newfound trust. Claire gathered her papers slowly, watching Jack as he straightened the chairs. His earlier hostility toward her seemed to have faded, replaced by something thoughtful. She understood. It was impossible to witness what had just happened and not be moved by it. These kids had seen through his scars to his strength, just as she had that first night at the fundraiser. But now, watching him connect with them, seeing his genuine care for their pain, she realized she'd only scratched the surface of who Jack Miller really was. The school auditorium buzzed with teenage energy as Jack and Claire set up their presentation materials. It was their 3rd school visit this week, part of their veteran youth mentorship initiative. While Claire adjusted her perfectly pressed blazer, Jack rolled up his sleeves, revealing the scars that traced his forearms like roadmaps of his past. "You don't have to hide them," Claire said quietly, noticing how he usually kept them covered. Jack paused, considering her words. "These kids need to see," Real. Not polished. The honesty in his voice struck her. She watched as he approached a group of students who had wandered in early, his posture relaxed and natural. There was no trace of the corporate presentation style she was used to. "Hey guys," he said, pulling up a chair backward and straddling it. "Anyone here ever feel like they don't fit in?" Several hands went up hesitantly. Claire observed from the side, noting how the teenager's defensive postures slowly softened as Jack shared stories about his own struggles in high school, before and after his military service. "Man, my first day back in civilian clothes? I wore my boots with a suit," he chuckled, earning genuine laughs from the students. "Looked like a penguin who got lost at boot camp." Throughout the following weeks, their visits took them across the city. They spoke at inner-city schools where hope seemed in short supply, and at suburban campuses where pressure to succeed crushed young spirits. At each stop, Claire watched Jack work his quiet magic. At Jefferson High, a girl with burn scars on her face lingered after their talk. Claire overheard Jack telling her, "The strongest people I know wear their scars on the outside. Shows they fought through something tough and won." The girl's mother later emailed to say her daughter had started wearing her hair pulled back for the first time in 2 years. At Roosevelt Tech, a boy with anger issues connected with Jack's stories about PTSD. "Sometimes the biggest battles happen in here," Jack had said, tapping his temple. The school counselor reported the boy had finally agreed to try therapy. Claire found herself taking notes, not for reports or metrics, but because Jack's unvarnished wisdom kept surprising her. He didn't use corporate buzzwords or carefully crafted messaging. He just spoke truth, and it worked. One rainy afternoon, they visited St. Mary's School for Girls. As they were packing up, Claire noticed Jack staring at a photo of Emma at that age on his phone. "You miss her," Claire said. "It wasn't a question. Every minute I'm away," he admitted. "But she'd want me here. She's always pushing me to help others. She's wise beyond her years." "Yeah," Jack smiled softly. "She raised me as much as I raised her these past few years." The simple admission touched Claire deeply. In her world of quarterly reports and shareholder meetings, such vulnerability was rare. She was beginning to see how her carefully constructed corporate approaches often missed the human element that Jack naturally embodied. After a particularly long day at their 6th school that week, they found themselves at a small diner near the office. The vinyl booth squeaked as they slid in, and the coffee came in thick ceramic mugs that had seen better days. It was about as far from Claire's usual premium coffee shops as you could get, but somehow it felt right. "You probably don't come to places like this much," Jack said, adding cream to his coffee. Claire looked around at the worn but clean surfaces, the tired but friendly waitress, the mixed crowd of workers and families. "No," she admitted. "But I like it. It feels real," Jack suggested. "Yes." She wrapped her hands around her mug, feeling its warmth. "You know, these past weeks have shown me so much. The way you connect with these kids, how you cut through all the corporate nonsense I'm used to. It's like seeing the world through new eyes." Jack stirred his coffee thoughtfully. The silence between them felt comfortable now, not charged with tension like before. "I feel more alive when I'm with you," Claire said softly, surprising herself with the admission. Jack didn't respond with words, but his eyes met hers across the table. The hardness that had been there since the newspaper article had softened, replaced by something warmer, something that made Claire's heart beat a little faster. The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious, as the diner's old clock ticked quietly on the wall, and the evening traffic hummed outside the window. The evening sun cast long shadows across Jack's modest front yard as Claire's car pulled into the driveway. She double-checked the manila folder on her passenger seat, containing the program notes she needed to drop off. It felt strange being here, at Jack's home, away from the polished walls of their corporate environment. Before she could even step out of her car, Emma burst through the front door, her face lighting up with genuine excitement. "Miss Donovan, I thought I heard a car." She bounded down the porch steps, her long brown hair swinging behind her. Claire smiled, tucking the folder under her arm as she got out. "Hi, Emma. I just needed to give your dad some paperwork for tomorrow's—" "Dad," Emma called over her shoulder, cutting Claire off. "Miss Donovan is here." She turned back to Claire, practically bouncing. "You have to stay for dinner. Dad made his famous meatloaf, and there's way too much for just us two." Claire hesitated, glancing toward the house. Oh, I wouldn't want to impose. Jack appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He wore faded jeans and a simple gray t-shirt, so different from his careful office attire. Emma, he said with gentle warning in his voice, Miss Donovan probably has plans. I actually don't, Claire found herself saying, surprising even herself. She held up the folder awkwardly. But I really just came to drop these off. Emma seized the moment. Please stay. Dad's meatloaf is actually edible, I promise, unlike his attempts at lasagna. She grimaced dramatically, making Claire laugh. Jack shook his head, but Claire caught the hint of a smile. Thanks for that glowing recommendation, kiddo. He met Claire's eyes. But she's right, there's plenty. If you'd like to join us. The invitation hung in the air, tentative but genuine. Claire found herself nodding. Well, if you're sure. Yes. Emma grabbed Claire's hand, tugging her toward the house. I'll show you where to put your purse. Dad just has to finish the green beans. The inside of Jack's home was exactly what Claire might have expected. Clean and orderly, with comfortable, well-worn furniture. Military precision mixed with the unmistakable signs of a teenage daughter. A backpack sprawled by the stairs, colorful magnets holding artwork to the fridge, a pair of purple sneakers kicked off by the door. Emma, homework done? Jack called from the kitchen. Almost. Emma led Claire to the dining room. Just one more math problem. I'll finish it after dinner? Before. Jack corrected firmly but kindly. Go on. Get it done while I finish up in here. Emma sighed dramatically but complied, disappearing upstairs with a "be right back" that echoed through the house. Claire found herself alone in the dining room, taking in the simple wooden table set with mismatched plates. A few family photos hung on the walls, Emma at various ages, and one of Jack in his uniform, looking younger and unburdened. Can I help with anything? She called toward the kitchen. I've got it under control, Jack answered. But Claire followed his voice anyway. The kitchen was small, but tidy, warm with the smell of cooking. Jack stood at the stove, stirring green beans in a pan. A ceramic dish of meatloaf cooled on the counter. It all felt so normal, so far from their corporate meetings and youth program planning sessions. This is nice, Claire said softly, leaning against the doorframe. Your home. It feels lived in, happy. Jack glanced at her, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Emma makes it that way. She's good at bringing life to things. She's remarkable, Claire smiled. You've done an amazing job with her. She makes it easy. Jack turned off the burner, then seemed to realize something. Oh, would you like something to drink? We have water, tea. Water would be great, thanks. Their hands brushed as he passed her a glass, and Claire felt a little jolt of awareness. Jack cleared his throat, stepping back. Done, Emma announced, bounding back into the kitchen. All solved for X and everything. Show me? Jack asked, and Emma produced her notebook. He checked her work while Claire watched, touched by their easy rapport. Dinner itself was surprisingly comfortable. Emma carried most of the conversation, telling Claire about school, her friends, and her dream of becoming a veterinarian. Jack remained quieter but present, his eyes often finding Claire's across the table when Emma said something particularly entertaining. The meatloaf really is good, Claire commented, and Jack ducked his head in acknowledgement. Wait till you try the pie, Emma said. Dad's stress bakes when he's nervous about stuff. He made it this morning before work. Emma, Jack warned, but there was no heat in it. What? You do? Remember when you had to give that speech at the fundraiser? We had like 3 pies that week. Claire watched Jack's face, worried the reminder would bring back painful memories, but he just shook his head with a slight smile. Since my baking habits are apparently up for discussion, would anyone actually like some of said pie? Apple? Claire asked. What else? Emma grinned. As Jack served the pie, which was indeed excellent, Emma looked between them with an impish smile. You know, Dad smiles more when you're around. Claire felt heat rise to her cheeks as Jack nearly dropped the pie server. Their eyes met across the table, embarrassed, yet neither quite able to look away. There was something warm in Jack's gaze that made Claire's heart beat a little faster. The moment stretched, full of unspoken things, until Emma's delighted giggle broke the spell. Jack cleared his throat and focused very intently on serving the pie. But Claire noticed his ears had turned slightly pink. She hid her own smile behind her water glass, suddenly very glad she'd stayed for dinner. Jack stared at the formal invitation on his kitchen table, his jaw tightening. The embossed golden letters seemed to mock him. Annual Corporate Leadership Gala. He'd managed to avoid these fancy events his whole life, and now Claire expected him to attend one. "Dad, you have to go." Emma sat across from him, practically vibrating with excitement. "Ms. Donovan specifically asked for you to be there. The whole mentorship program presentation is about your work." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "Emma, those kinds of events, they're not for people like me. It's all fancy speeches and fake smiles." "That's not true." Emma reached across the table and touched his hand. "You're changing kids' lives, real kids. There's nothing fake about that." A knock at the door interrupted them. Claire stood there in her business suit, looking somewhat apologetic. "I thought I'd stop by to make sure you got the invitation." Emma jumped up. "He got it, but he's being stubborn about going." Claire stepped inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Jack, the board needs to see the impact you're having. These kids look up to you. You're living proof that their struggles don't define them." Jack's shoulders tensed. "I'm not some success story to parade around, Claire." "No," she said firmly. "You're a leader. Those teenagers you mentor, they stand taller when you're in the room. That's what I want to showcase. Not your past, but what you're building now." Emma nodded vigorously. "Plus, Dad, you'd look really handsome in a suit." A hint of color touched Jack's cheeks. He looked between his daughter's hopeful face and Claire's steady gaze. "I don't even own a proper suit," he muttered. "Then we'll go shopping." Emma clapped her hands. "Please, Dad? For me?" Jack sighed, recognizing defeat. "Fine, but I'm not giving any speeches." The next afternoon found Jack and Emma at a men's formal wear store. Emma took charge immediately, directing her father through racks of suits while the saleswoman smiled at their interaction. "This one," Emma declared, holding up a classic black suit. "It's perfect." Jack eyed the price tag and winced. "Princess, that's too much." "Dad." Emma's voice was stern. "You deserve this. Remember what you always tell those kids at the center? Your worth isn't measured by your scars." Jack's throat tightened. Sometimes his daughter's wisdom caught him off guard. He took the suit and headed to the fitting room. When he emerged, Emma's eyes welled up. "Oh, Dad," she whispered. The suit fit perfectly, making him stand straighter, transforming him from uncertain veteran to distinguished gentleman. The saleswoman made a few minor adjustments, and Emma insisted on a deep blue tie that matches your eyes, Dad. By the time they left the store, Jack felt a tiny spark of excitement beneath his nervousness. The night of the gala arrived, clear and cool. Jack adjusted his tie for the 100th time in the mirror while Emma beamed behind him. "Stop fidgeting," she instructed. "You look amazing." A car horn sounded outside. Claire had insisted on sending a car service. Emma hugged him tight. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," she whispered. "Mom would be too." Jack blinked hard and kissed the top of her head. "Be good for Mrs. Martinez next door, okay?" The hotel ballroom was transformed into an elegant wonderland of soft lights and flowing champagne. Jack's hands grew clammy as he entered. But then he spotted some of the teenagers from his mentorship program, dressed in their best clothes, looking just as nervous as he felt. They brightened when they saw him. "Mr. Miller." Marcus, a 16-year-old who reminded Jack of himself at that age, hurried over. "Man, you clean up good." Jack laughed, relaxing slightly. "So do you, kid. Nice tie." He was still chatting with the teens when Claire appeared, stunning in a midnight blue gown. Their eyes met across the room, and something warm unfurled in Jack's chest. "Welcome, everyone." Claire's voice carried through the microphone, commanding the room's attention. "Tonight, we're here to celebrate courage, not just in business, but in life." Jack listened as she described the mentorship program, sharing stories of transformation. Then she turned toward him, her eyes bright. "But the true CEO of courage stands among us tonight. Jack Miller didn't just survive his battles. He showed us all how to fight for others. Every day, he teaches our youth that their challenges can become their strength." The room fell silent, all eyes on Jack. But for the first time, the attention didn't make him want to run. Claire's words wrapped around him like armor. "In Jack, these kids see what's possible. They see that healing isn't about erasing scars, but about wearing them with pride and using them to light the way for others." The applause started slowly, then built to a roar as people rose to their feet. Jack saw Marcus and the other teens clapping wildly, their faces shining. He felt something shift inside him. Pride, not shame, for who he was and what he'd survived. Claire descended from the podium and walked directly to him, extending her hand. "May I have this dance?" The orchestra began playing a soft melody. Jack took her hand, his heart thundering, but his steps sure as he led her to the dance floor. As they swayed together, he realized he no longer felt out of place in his fancy suit. In this glittering room, he belonged here, not despite his scars, but because of who they had helped him become. The grand ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers, their light catching on polished marble floors and elegant table settings. Jack stood at the edge of the dance floor, his heart thundering in his chest. Claire's words from her speech still rang in his ears. The true CEO of courage. No one had ever described him that way before. Claire glided toward him in her midnight blue evening gown, her eyes bright with emotion. "Dance with me?" She extended her hand, and Jack noticed it trembled slightly. Even Claire Donovan, the iron-willed CEO, could be nervous. "I'm not much of a dancer," Jack admitted, tugging at his new suit collar. Emma had helped him pick it out. Charcoal gray with a blue tie that, his daughter insisted, brought out his eyes. "Neither am I," Claire confessed with a small laugh. "We can be terrible together." The band started playing a slow song, something gentle and sweet. Jack took Claire's hand, surprised by how natural it felt. They moved to the center of the dance floor, other couples parting to make way. He could feel eyes on them. But for once, the attention didn't make him want to run. "You know," Claire said softly as they swayed to the music, "when I first saw you at that fundraiser, I knew you were special." Jack's throat tightened. "You saw a mess that day." "No," Claire's hand squeezed his shoulder. "I saw someone brave enough to try, even when it hurt. That's what makes you different, Jack. You never stop trying." The music wrapped around them like a warm embrace. Jack's usual hyper-awareness of his scars faded. Here, holding Claire, he didn't feel like the broken soldier or the struggling single dad. He felt whole. "The kids in our program," he said, "they look at me different now. Not with pity. They see what I see," Claire finished. "A hero who came home and kept fighting. Not with weapons, but with heart." Jack's steps faltered for a moment as emotion washed over him. Claire steadied him, her touch gentle but sure. Around them, other dancers continued their elegant movements, but Jack barely noticed them. In this moment, the world had narrowed to just this: the music, the warmth of Claire's hand in his, and the way she looked at him like he was something precious. "Claire," he whispered, his voice rough with feeling. "You changed everything." She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. "No, Jack, you did that yourself. I just had the privilege of watching you bloom." The music swelled, and something inside Jack broke open, not in pain, but in joy. He pulled Claire closer and kissed her, right there in front of everyone. Her lips were soft against his, and she melted into him without hesitation. The scarred side of his face pressed against her cheek, but for the first time in years, he didn't flinch away. Applause erupted around them. Jack heard Emma's delighted squeal from somewhere in the crowd. When they finally parted, Claire's lipstick was slightly smudged, and her smile could have lit up the whole room. "Well," she said, touching her fingers to her lips, "I guess that makes it official." Jack laughed, a free, unguarded sound that surprised even him. "Guess so." They danced through 3 more songs before Emma appeared at their side, yawning but beaming. "Dad, can we go home? I'm getting sleepy." The drive home was quiet, with Emma dozing in the back seat. Street lights painted golden stripes across the dashboard as Jack navigated through the peaceful streets. His lips still tingled from Claire's goodnight kiss in the parking lot. He glanced in the rearview mirror at his sleeping daughter, then touched the scars on his face, not with shame, but with acceptance. The evening played like a beautiful movie in his mind. The dance, the kiss, the way Claire looked at him like his scars were badges of honor rather than marks of shame. A smile tugged at his lips as he whispered into the quiet car. "Maybe I deserve this after all." Emma shifted in her sleep, murmuring contentedly. The city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in years, Jack's future looked just as bright. Jack settled into Claire's office chair, feeling at ease for the first time in years. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, warming his face as he logged into her computer to print materials for their next youth mentorship session. His fingers moved confidently across the keyboard. She had trusted him with her password last week, a small gesture that had meant the world to him. He clicked through folders, searching for the presentation they'd worked on together. A notification popped up in the corner of the screen. Email storage nearly full. Jack didn't mean to look, but his eyes caught a subject line that made his heart stop. Miller situation, PR strategy. His hand trembled on the mouse. The date was from just before she'd hired him. Something cold settled in his stomach as he clicked. The first email was from Thomas Bradford, head of the board. Claire, while your veteran initiative has merit, we need to ensure maximum impact. The Miller story could be exactly what we need. Decorated veteran, single father, visible scars. The optics would be perfect for humanizing our corporate image. Jack's throat went dry. Another board member had replied, agreed. A wounded warrior finding redemption through our company? The press will eat it up. Shareholders will love the social responsibility angle. More responses filled the screen. Words jumped out at him. Strategic hiring, publicity goldmine, perfect narrative. His vision blurred as anger and humiliation crashed over him. All this time, he'd been nothing but a calculated PR move. He scrolled frantically, looking for Claire's response. There it was, dated 3 days after the others. Let's focus on building a genuine program. Jack Miller is not a publicity stunt. But she hadn't denied it. She hadn't shut it down completely. And she'd never told him about these discussions. The office suddenly felt too small, too corporate, too fake. The walls of polished mahogany that had begun to feel welcoming now seemed to mock him. Every award plaque, every framed achievement, were they all built on stories like his? On people's pain packaged for public consumption? His hands shook as he printed the emails. The printer's quiet hum felt deafening in the silence of his betrayal. He remembered Claire's words at the gala, true CEO of courage. Had that been stage 2? A scripted moment for maximum impact? Jack paced the office, the printed emails clutched in his fist. The past months replayed in his mind. Every kind word, every gentle touch, every moment he'd thought was real. Emma's face flashed before him, how she'd started to trust Claire, to see her as family. The thought made him sick. Heavy footsteps approached the office. Claire's voice drifted in, talking on her phone about upcoming presentations. Jack's jaw clenched. She stepped through the door, her face lighting up when she saw him. But her smile died when she registered his expression. Jack, what's wrong? He threw the emails onto her desk. They scattered like autumn leaves, damning words face up on the polished surface. Claire's face went pale as she recognized them. Would you like to explain this? His voice was deadly quiet. Claire reached for the papers with trembling hands. Jack, these emails weren't my idea. I never wanted what? His voice rose. Never wanted to exploit a broken veteran for good press? Never wanted to turn my scars into a feel-good story for your shareholders? No. Claire stepped toward him, but he backed away. Jack, please. You have to believe me. The board suggested it, but I never what, Claire? Never meant for me to find out? The rage he'd thought he'd left behind in therapy came roaring back. Was any of it real? The mentorship program? The gala? Us? All of it was real. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Everything between us is real. I fought against using your story this way. What you wanted was a perfect narrative. Jack's fist slammed against the desk. The wounded warrior finding healing through the benevolent CEO. Did you plan the timing of our first kiss too? Make sure the photographers got the right angle? Stop it, Claire's voice cracked. You're not being fair. Look at my response in those emails. I explicitly said, you said enough by never telling me about this. Jack's voice dropped to a whisper, worse than his shouts. I trusted you. Emma trusted you. Do you know what that means for people like us? Claire reached for him again, desperation in her eyes. Jack, please, don't. He held up his hand. Don't you dare say those words. Not now. He turned toward the door, his shoulders rigid with fury and grief. Behind him, Claire's breath came in ragged sobs. It's over, Claire. He didn't turn around. Whatever this was, This game, this PR strategy, this lie, it's over. Jack, wait. But he was already gone, leaving Claire alone in her office with scattered emails and shattered trust. His footsteps echoed down the hallway, each one taking him further from the future he'd dared to imagine, from the happiness he'd foolishly thought he deserved. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the pictures on the walls of the modest Miller home. Emma jumped from where she sat doing homework at the kitchen table, her math textbook forgotten as her father stormed in. His face was twisted with anger she hadn't seen since his darkest days after returning from combat. "Dad?" she called out cautiously. "What happened?" Jack paced the living room like a caged animal, his boots leaving scuff marks on the worn carpet. "It was all fake, Emma. Every single bit of it." His voice cracked with barely contained fury. "Claire Donovan isn't who we thought she was. None of it was real." Emma set down her pencil, her heart beginning to race. "What do you mean? Did something happen at work?" "You want to know what happened?" Jack's laugh was bitter, hollow. He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "I found emails. The board members, they were planning it all along, using my story, my scars, everything about me to make their company look good. And Claire," he spat out her name like it tasted foul. "She knew. She had to have known." "But that doesn't make sense," Emma protested, rising from her chair. "I've seen how she looks at you, Dad. The way she talks about you. That can't be fake." "You're 13, Emma. You don't understand how the world works." Jack's words came out harsh, dismissive. "People like Claire Donovan, they don't care about people like us. We're just their feel-good story of the month." Emma felt her own anger rising, hot and sharp. "No, you don't understand. You're so busy expecting everyone to hurt you that you don't see when they actually care." "I heard her board members in those emails." Jack's voice rose, talking about my tragic story like it was some kind of golden ticket, how it would humanize their precious company image. He kicked the coffee table, sending magazines scattering. "I trusted her, Emma. I let her in. His voice caught. "I even started to believe I could." "Could what, Dad? Be happy?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're scared because you were finally feeling better, finally letting someone help you heal. And now you're looking for any excuse to push her away, just like you push everyone away." Jack whirled to face his daughter, his expression stricken. That's not fair. I'm trying to protect us." "Protect us from what?" Emma demanded. "From having a normal life? From letting people care about us? Did you even let Claire explain?" "There's nothing to explain." Jack's voice thundered through the small house. "I saw it with my own eyes. Jack Miller's compelling story of survival, the perfect face for our veteran initiative. They were planning to parade me around like some kind of circus act. But that wasn't Claire. Those were other people's emails." Emma's voice cracked with desperation. "Claire's different. She sees you, the real you. I've watched her defend you to everyone who doubted you could handle the job. She fights for you, Dad." "Stop it, Emma." Jack's voice went dangerously quiet. "You're too young to understand corporate manipulation. And you're too stubborn to understand love," Emma shouted back. "You know what? Maybe those other board members did want to use your story. But Claire, she gave you a real job. Real responsibility. She trusts you with important things. She makes you laugh again. I haven't heard you really laugh since before deployment." Jack flinched as if she'd struck him. "Emma, no. I'm not finished." Tears streamed down Emma's face now. "Do you know what it's like watching your dad hide from the world? Seeing you jump at loud noises? Wake up screaming from nightmares? Push away anyone who tries to help? And then finally, someone breaks through all your walls, makes you smile again, helps you feel proud instead of ashamed, and you just throw it all away because you're scared." "I am not scared," Jack roared. "I'm trying to protect what little dignity I have left. I won't be anyone's charity case or PR stunt." "No," Emma's voice trembled. "You'd rather be miserable and alone. Well, guess what, Dad? You're not the only one who's miserable. I'm tired of living like this. Tired of watching you choose to stay broken." The words hung in the air between them like shrapnel. Jack staggered back as if physically struck, all color draining from his face. Emma clapped her hands over her mouth, horrified at what she'd said, but it was too late to take it back. "Emma, Jack reached for her, but she was already running down the hallway. "Just leave me alone!" she sobbed. Her bedroom door slammed shut, followed by the decisive click of the lock. Jack stood frozen in the middle of the living room, his daughter's words echoing in his head. The sound of her muffled crying filtered through the thin walls, each sob like a knife to his heart. Slowly, as if his legs could barely support him, he sank onto the couch. His hands shook as he covered his face. What had he done? In his determination to protect himself from betrayal, he'd wounded the one person he'd sworn never to hurt, his beautiful, brave daughter who had stood by him through all the dark days, who had never given up on him even when he'd given up on himself. Through the wall, Emma's crying continued, the sound of his daughter's broken heart tearing him apart inside. Jack slumped deeper into the couch, the weight of his choices crushing him. He wasn't just destroying himself anymore. He was breaking his little girl, too. Jack sat at his desk, staring blankly at his resignation letter. The cursor blinked steadily on his computer screen, mocking him with its rhythm. Every word felt like another nail in a coffin he'd built himself. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly as he added the final period. The office around him was quiet, too quiet. He'd come in early, before anyone else arrived, to pack his things and leave his letter. A coward's exit, maybe, but he couldn't face the pitying looks, the whispers, the judgment. Not again. His phone buzzed, another message from Claire. He hadn't answered any of them since discovering those emails 3 days ago. Each unopened text felt like a fresh betrayal. "Mr. Miller?" Sarah from HR stood in his doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "The board meeting is starting. They've requested your presence." Jack's jaw clenched. "I won't be attending. In fact," he gestured to the box of personal items on his desk. "I'm leaving." Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly. "Sir?" Ms. Donovan specifically asked. "I don't care what she asked," Jack snapped, immediately regretting his harsh tone when Sarah flinched. He softened his voice. "I'm sorry. Please, just make sure she gets this." He handed over the printed resignation letter. Down the hall, raised voices echoed from the boardroom. Jack recognized Claire's voice, strong but strained, defending herself against accusations. "The veteran program was never about exploitation," Claire insisted, her words carrying through the partially open door. "Jack Miller is one of the most qualified." "The optics are terrible," a male voice interrupted. "First, the newspaper article, now this. The public thinks we're using wounded veterans for PR. That was never the intention." Claire's voice cracked slightly. "If you just let me explain." Jack's hands curled into fists. Part of him wanted to burst in there to defend her, but the memory of those emails burned fresh in his mind. Perfect timing. His story will humanize our image. The board will love this narrative. Each word had been a knife in his back. He grabbed his box and headed for the elevator. Behind him, the argument in the boardroom grew louder. As the elevator doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of Sarah walking toward the meeting, his resignation letter in hand. At home, Jack paced his living room like a caged animal. Emma was at school, thank God. He couldn't bear to see the disappointment in her eyes again. She'd barely spoken to him since their fight, spending most of her time locked in her room. The mantel above the fireplace caught his eye. There, in a simple wooden frame, sat his military medals. Distinguished Service Cross, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. Symbols of courage and sacrifice that now felt hollow. He picked up the frame, dust dancing in the afternoon light. These medals had once meant everything to him. They'd proven he was strong, capable, worthy. Now they just reminded him of all he'd lost. His phone buzzed again. Claire's name lit up the screen, along with a preview of her message. "Please, Jack, let me explain. The board is..." He turned the phone face down. The house felt suffocating. Memories of Claire were everywhere. The kitchen where she'd helped Emma bake cookies, the porch swing where they'd talked for hours, the spot by the window where she'd first kissed him. Each memory twisted like barbed wire around his heart. The Veterans Support Group had warned him about this, how PTSD could make trust feel impossible, how the instinct to push people away could destroy relationships. But knowing the pattern didn't make it any easier to break. More messages flooded his phone. News alerts about Claire's company, texts from coworkers, even one from Emma asking if he was okay. He ignored them all. As evening fell, Jack sat alone in his darkening living room. The frame of medals caught the last rays of sunlight, throwing shadows across the wall. His throat felt tight as he traced the ribbons with his finger. "I survived war," he whispered to the empty room, his voice rough with unshed tears. "But I can't survive love." The metals stared back at him, silent witnesses to his surrender. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the room before leaving him in darkness once again. In that moment, surrounded by shadows both real and metaphorical, Jack Miller felt more alone than he had in any battlefield. The crushing weight of his decisions, walking away from Claire, disappointing Emma, abandoning the program he'd helped build, pressed down on his chest until he could barely breathe. He'd survived combat only to let fear win this battle. The irony wasn't lost on him. His phone buzzed one final time. Claire's last message glowed in the darkness. "I never meant to hurt you. Please don't let fear win. Not like this." Jack turned the phone off completely, plunging the room into total darkness. The silence engulfed him, broken only by the sound of his ragged breathing and the distant tick of a clock, counting down moments in a life that suddenly felt emptier than ever. In the darkness, his metals caught a sliver of moonlight, reminding him of everything he'd fought for and everything he was now throwing away. But the pain of trust seemed worse than the pain of loneliness. At least loneliness was familiar. At least loneliness couldn't betray you. The house creaked and settled around him, its emptiness echoing his own. Tomorrow, he'd have to face Emma, explain why he'd quit his job, why he'd pushed away someone they both cared about. But for now, he sat in the dark, a decorated veteran defeated not by war, but by the prospect of peace. His whispered words hung in the air, a final admission of defeat. "I survived war, but I can't survive love." The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows, casting long shadows across the breakfast table. Jack sat hunched over his coffee, his thoughts dark, despite the cheerful light. He hadn't slept well, his mind replaying the email thread over and over, each word burning deeper into his consciousness. Emma walked into the kitchen, already dressed for school. She paused in the doorway, watching her father. The sight of him, shoulders slumped, unshaven, eyes fixed on nothing, made her heart ache. But there was also anger there, a frustration that had been building for days. "Dad," she said quietly, pulling out a chair across from him, "we need to talk." Jack looked up, trying to force a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep okay?" "Stop that," Emma said, her voice stronger than usual. "Stop pretending everything's fine when it's not." Jack's fake smile faded. He set down his coffee cup carefully, the gentle clink against the table, the only sound in the suddenly tense kitchen. "Emma, some things are complicated." "No, they're not," Emma interrupted. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, but her gaze was steady. "You're making them complicated because you're scared." "Emma," Jack started, a warning note in his voice. "I'm scared too, Dad," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "Every day. I'm scared when you withdraw like this. I'm scared when you push people away. I'm scared you'll never let yourself be happy." Jack's face softened. "Honey, I'm just trying to protect us." "From what?" Emma demanded. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. "From Claire? She cares about you. From having a normal life? From being happy? You don't understand what it's like," Jack said, his voice rough. "When people betray your trust." "I do understand." Emma stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Mom left us, remember? I know what betrayal feels like, but I'm not hiding from life because of it." Jack flinched as if she'd struck him. Emma had never spoken about her mother's departure so bluntly before. The pain in her voice cut through his defenses like a knife. "You taught me about courage?" Emma continued, softer now. "You told me stories about your unit, about how brave men face their fears. But Dad, courage isn't just about surviving combat." She walked around the table and stood beside him. Jack couldn't meet her eyes, but he felt the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. "Real courage is facing each new day," Emma said. "It's about letting people in, even when you're scared they might hurt you. It's about living, really living, not just existing." Jack's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "I'm trying, Emma. I really am." "Are you?" She touched his arm gently. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're letting your fears win. It looks like you're letting your scars make all your decisions." Jack finally looked up at his daughter, really looked at her. When had she grown so wise? When had his little girl become this insightful young woman? The thought both filled him with pride and broke his heart. "I see how you look at Claire," Emma continued. "I see how happy you were getting when you were with her. The program was helping people, helping you. But the minute things got hard, you ran away. Those emails," Jack started to defend himself, but Emma shook her head, "were written by board members, not Claire. You didn't even give her a chance to explain. You just assumed the worst because it's easier than trusting." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. Jack sat back in his chair, suddenly feeling every year of his age, every scar, both visible and invisible, that marked his body and soul. "When did you get so smart?" he asked quietly. Emma's lips quirked in a sad smile. "I had a good teacher. You taught me to be strong, Dad. Now, I need you to be strong too." She reached out and took his hand, her smaller fingers wrapping around his scarred ones. "I'm tired of living in fear, Dad. Tired of watching you live in fear. That's not the father I know. The father I know is brave enough to face anything, even love." Jack swallowed hard, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "I don't know if I can," he whispered. "Yes, you can," Emma insisted. "You're the strongest person I know. But strength isn't about pushing people away. It's about letting them in, even when it's scary." She squeezed his hand. "Promise me you'll at least think about it? Really think about it?" Jack looked at his daughter, this miracle who had somehow grown into his conscience, his heart. He nodded slowly. "I promise." Emma wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug, pressing her face against his shoulder. "Don't let your scars win, Dad," she whispered. "Please don't let them win." Jack held his daughter close, her words echoing in his mind. In that moment, he saw himself through her eyes, not as the broken man he'd become, but as the hero she believed him to be. And for the first time in days, a tiny spark of hope flickered in his heart. Claire sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, her usual commanding presence diminished by the weight of accusation hanging in the air. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows did nothing to warm the chill in the boardroom. Around her, 12 board members sat in expensive leather chairs, their faces a mix of disappointment and judgment. Miss Donovan, Richard Morton, the eldest board member, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. The publicity surrounding the veteran program has become problematic. His weathered hands shuffled through a stack of newspapers. These headlines suggest exploitation. Claire's throat tightened. She glanced down at the resignation letter in front of her, her signature ready to be added. The crisp white paper seemed to mock everything she'd built, everything she believed in. "The shareholders are concerned," Patricia Wells, another board member, added. Her red lipstick formed a thin line of disapproval. "Using a veteran's trauma for corporate gain? The optics are terrible." "I never—" Claire started, but her voice caught. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I never intended to exploit anyone, least of all Jack Miller. Intent doesn't matter anymore," Morton cut in. "The damage is done. An email thread I explicitly rejected," Claire said, her voice stronger now. "I told everyone that was not our purpose. Yet you pursued the relationship with Miller anyway," Wells pointed out. "Personal involvement with an employee? Really, Claire?" The words stung like a physical blow. Claire's hands clenched under the table, her knuckles white. These people had no idea, couldn't understand what Jack meant to her, how he'd awakened something she thought died with her brother. "The board has lost confidence," Morton continued, his tone gentler now, almost paternal. "We think it's best if—" "I'm already ahead of you," Claire interrupted. She pulled the resignation letter closer. "I've prepared my resignation." A murmur rippled through the room. Some board members looked relieved, others surprised at how easily their CEO was surrendering. They didn't know she'd spent the entire night crying, torn between her integrity and her broken heart. "I believe it's the right thing to do," Claire said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. The company's reputation was built on more than PR. A younger board member, David Chen, spoke up. "Your leadership has always been about genuine change." "Which is exactly why I have to step down," Claire replied. "How can I lead a company focused on making real difference when everyone believes I manipulated a veteran for publicity?" The words tasted bitter in her mouth. She stood slowly, smoothing her charcoal gray suit. The designer outfit that usually felt like armor now seemed like a costume, a pretense of strength she no longer possessed. "I'll read my statement." The room fell silent. Claire unfolded a second piece of paper, her prepared speech. The words blurred slightly as she blinked back tears she refused to shed. "Members of the board," she began, her voice clear despite her inner turmoil. "For 7 years, I've had the privilege of leading this company. We've built something remarkable, not just profitable, but meaningful. The Veteran Outreach Program wasn't about image. It was about honoring my brother's memory, about creating real change." She paused, swallowing hard. "But perception matters in leadership. When trust is broken, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. What matters is taking responsibility. The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open with a decisive push. Claire's heart stopped. Jack Miller stood in the doorway. He was wearing his best suit, the one he'd worn to the gala, but his tie was slightly crooked and his face showed the strain of someone who hadn't slept. His scar seemed more pronounced in the morning light, but there was a determination in his eyes that Claire hadn't seen since the night of the dance. For a moment, time seemed suspended. The board members turned in their chairs, faces showing various degrees of shock and dismay. Claire's resignation speech trembled in her hands, forgotten. Jack stood there, his presence filling the room with an energy that made the previous tension seem trivial. The boardroom fell silent as Jack strode in, his military bearing evident in every step. He wore his best suit, the one Emma had helped him choose for the gala, but his face carried the weary lines of sleepless nights. Claire's breath caught in her throat at the sight of him. "Mr. Miller," one of the board members said, "this is a private meeting. With respect, sir, I need to speak." Jack's voice was steady, though his hands trembled slightly. He looked at Claire, whose eyes were wide with surprise. "This involves me, after all." The board chairman, a silver-haired man named Peterson, leaned forward. "Very well. You have the floor, Mr. Miller." Jack moved to the center of the room, his presence commanding attention. The morning sun caught the scar on his face, but for once, he didn't try to hide it. "A week ago, I found some emails suggesting that my story could help the company's image. I was angry, humiliated. I felt used." Claire started to speak, but Jack held up his hand gently. "Please, let me finish." He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the faces around the table. "I've spent years building walls to protect myself. When I came home from war, I thought I was broken beyond repair. My daughter Emma was the only light in my life. But then," his voice softened as he looked at Claire, "then I met someone who saw past my scars. Someone who gave me more than just a job. She gave me purpose." Jack pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Last night, my daughter gave me this. It's her English essay about heroes." His voice cracked slightly as he read. "My dad used to hide from the world, but now he helps other veterans. He speaks at schools. He smiles again, and it's because someone believed in him." The room was completely still. Even the usual city noise seemed muted behind the thick windows. Jack carefully folded the paper and continued. "I was wrong about Claire, about all of this. Yes, I found those emails, but I also found hundreds more. Emails of Claire fighting for better veteran programs, of her challenging anyone who tried to turn this into a publicity stunt." He turned to face the board directly, his shoulders straight. "You want to know if Claire Donovan exploited a broken veteran? The truth is, I needed her far more than she needed me. I was drowning in darkness, and she threw me a lifeline. Not because it would look good in the papers, but because she saw something in me I couldn't see myself." Jack's voice grew stronger, filling the room. "I am not Claire's project. I am her partner. In healing, in hope, and God willing, in love." He looked at Claire, whose eyes were brimming with tears. "I've been running from happiness because I thought I didn't deserve it. But my daughter taught me something important. Real courage isn't about surviving war. It's about daring to live again." One of the board members dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Another cleared his throat awkwardly. The chairman sat back, his stern expression softening. "And if anyone in this room thinks Claire Donovan needs to resign," Jack continued, "then you'll have to accept my resignation too. Because the Veteran Outreach Program isn't just her vision anymore. It's ours. And we're just getting started." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, Peterson stood up. Mr. Miller, that was. He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. That was exactly what this board needed to hear. Another board member stood, then another. The applause started softly, then built until it filled the room. Claire rose from her chair, tears streaming down her face. She ran to Jack, wrapping her arms around him in a fierce embrace. His arms encircled her, holding her close as the applause continued around them. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against her hair. "I should have trusted you." Claire pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her hands cupping his face. "You're here now. That's all that matters." The chairman's voice cut through the moment. "Miss Donovan, I believe we can conclude this meeting. Your leadership is not in question." He smiled, a rare sight. In fact, I'd say it's been rather brilliantly validated. The heavy glass doors of the corporate building swung shut behind them as Jack and Claire stepped into the crisp afternoon air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the manicured courtyard. Neither spoke at first, letting the weight of what had just happened in the boardroom settle around them. Claire's heels clicked softly against the concrete as they walked side by side. Her usual confident stride was softer now, more hesitant. She kept stealing glances at Jack, as if afraid he might disappear if she looked away too long. Jack's hands were buried deep in his pockets, his shoulders tense despite the victory they'd just shared inside. The familiar weight of anxiety pressed against his chest, but it felt different now, lighter somehow, like a load he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. They reached the stone bench near the building's small garden, where bright yellow daffodils swayed in the gentle breeze. Claire sat down, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. Jack remained standing for a moment, rocking slightly on his heels, before finally lowering himself beside her. "I should have trusted you," he said quietly, breaking the silence. His voice was rough with emotion. "All this time, I've been..." He paused, searching for the right words. "I've been fighting the wrong battle." Claire turned to face him, her eyes glistening. "Jack, you don't have to..." "Yes, I do." He cut her off gently but firmly. "Please, let me say this." She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "When I came home from war," Jack continued, his gaze fixed on the dancing daffodils, "I thought the hardest part would be dealing with the physical scars, the nightmares, the memories." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "But that wasn't it at all. The hardest part was letting myself believe I deserved good things again." A tear slipped down Claire's cheek, but she remained silent, giving him the space to continue. "Emma tried to tell me. She's been trying to tell me for years." Jack shook his head, a sad smile touching his lips. "My teenage daughter had to be the wise one, watching her old man hide from life instead of living it." He turned to face Claire fully now, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You know what I realized in that boardroom just now? I've been more afraid of happiness than I ever was of war. Because in war, everything's clear. Your mission, your duty, who's friend, and who's enemy. But this," he gestured between them, "this terrified me." Claire reached out slowly, taking his scarred hand in both of hers. "I understand fear, Jack. After my brother died, I built walls too. Perfect, polished, corporate walls where nothing could hurt me again. We're quite a pair, aren't we?" Jack's voice softened, and his thumb brushed gently over her knuckles. "A CEO who hides behind her title and a veteran who hides behind his scars." Claire corrected him gently. "We were quite a pair." She squeezed his hand. "But you changed that today. Walking into that boardroom, standing up for both of us. That was real courage, Jack." He shook his head, but there was warmth in his eyes now. "I just told the truth. Finally told it after fighting it for so long." He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Claire. Sorry for not trusting you, for letting my fears twist everything into something ugly. You never saw me as broken, never treated me like a charity case. You saw me, just me." The late afternoon sun caught the moisture in Claire's eyes, making them sparkle. "You're the real hero," she whispered, echoing her words from the gala, but this time with a deeper understanding of their truth. Jack's face softened into a genuine smile, the kind that reached his eyes and erased years of pain from his features. "Not anymore," he replied, pulling her closer. "We're heroes together." They sat there as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, their fingers intertwined, their hearts finally beating in sync. The daffodils continued their gentle dance in the breeze, witnesses to a different kind of courage, the kind that comes not from facing death, but from choosing life, choosing love, choosing to believe in something good again. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Veterans Chapel, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the worn wooden pews. Jack Miller stood in the entrance, his hand resting on the familiar brass door handle. His heart thundered in his chest as he watched Claire's car pull into the small parking lot. This modest chapel had been his sanctuary during his darkest days. The simple wooden cross, the faded American flag, and the wall of remembrance bearing the names of fallen soldiers. They had witnessed his countless solitary prayers and broken tears. Now, he was about to share this sacred space with the two people who had helped him find his way back to life. Emma bounded out of the passenger seat first, her blue dress swishing as she practically skipped up the stone steps. Her eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. She knew what was coming. Jack had asked for her blessing the night before, and she had thrown her arms around him, crying happy tears into his shoulder. "Dad, this place is beautiful," Emma whispered as she reached him, squeezing his hand. Her smile was bright enough to light up the dimming day. Claire emerged from the car more slowly, elegant, in a cream-colored dress that caught the golden light. Her eyes met Jack's, and he saw in them the same mixture of tenderness and strength that had first drawn him to her. She had learned to read his silences, to understand the weight he carried without trying to lift it for him. Instead, she had shown him how to carry it with grace. "Jack," she called softly, climbing the steps, "why did you want us to meet here?" He cleared his throat, suddenly feeling the weight of the small velvet box in his pocket. "This chapel, it's special to me. When I came back from deployment, when everything felt dark and broken, this is where I found some peace." His voice was rough with emotion. "I want to share it with you both." The heavy wooden door creaked as he led them inside. The chapel was empty except for them, just as he'd arranged with Pastor Mike. Their footsteps echoed in the hushed space as they walked down the center aisle. The late sun streaming through the windows painted Claire's face in soft blues and golds, making her look almost ethereal. Jack's hand trembled slightly as he guided them to the front pew. The familiar scent of old wood and beeswax candles filled his lungs. How many times had he sat here alone, wrestling with his demons? Now, with Emma's warm presence on one side and Claire's quiet strength on the other, those demons seemed to retreat into the shadows. "I used to come here every day after I first got back," he explained, his voice low. "I'd sit right here and try to make sense of everything. Try to figure out how to be a father again, how to live in a world that felt too loud, too bright." He swallowed hard. "I was so lost." Claire's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his scarred ones. She didn't speak, giving him the space to find his words. Emma watched them both, her young face full of understanding beyond her years. She had seen her father at his worst, had weathered his storms with unwavering love. Now, she was watching him gather his courage for something beautiful. Jack took a deep breath and turned to face Claire fully. "But then you happened. Both of you. Emma never gave up on me. And you, Claire, you saw past my scars, past my anger. You didn't try to fix me. You just loved me as I was." Tears began to gather in Claire's eyes as understanding dawned on her face. Jack slowly lowered himself to one knee on the worn carpet, his movements deliberate and steady. Emma clasped her hands together, barely containing a squeal of delight. "I brought you here because this place represents both who I was and who I've become," Jack continued, his voice growing stronger. "This is where I learned to hope again. And now." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Now I want to share that hope, that future, with you." Claire's breath caught audibly. The last rays of sunlight through the stained glass wrapped around them like a blessing as Jack looked up at her, his heart in his eyes. "Will you be my family?" he asked simply, the words carrying all the weight of his journey, all the promise of their shared tomorrow. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then she found her voice. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Jack, yes." Emma let out a joyful cry as Jack slipped the ring onto Claire's trembling finger. Then they were all standing, coming together in a tight embrace. Their tears mingled as they held each other, 3 hearts beating as one in the sacred silence of the chapel. The light through the windows shifted, painting them in a rainbow of colors, blue for the depths they'd crossed, red for the love they'd found, and gold for the hope they now shared. In that moment, Wrapped in each other's arms, they were no longer broken pieces trying to fit together. They were whole. They were family. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Veterans Chapel, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. The small sanctuary buzzed with quiet excitement as friends, family, and veterans gathered for Jack and Claire's wedding. Simple white ribbons and wildflower bouquets adorned the ends of each row, their natural beauty matching the chapel's humble charm. In the back room, Emma adjusted her father's tie with careful fingers. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he looked in the mirror, his dress uniform pressed and medals gleaming. "You look handsome, Dad," Emma said, smoothing his lapel. She wore a flowing blue dress that made her look older than her 13 years. "Are you nervous?" Jack took a deep breath. "A little. Different kind of nervous than combat, though." He managed a small smile. "Good nervous." Emma nodded, understanding. She took his hand, squeezing it. "Claire's going to cry when she sees you in your uniform." "You think?" Jack tugged at his collar, the familiar weight of his medals both comforting and heavy with memory. The chapel's old piano began playing softly their cue. Emma linked her arm through her father's, standing tall beside him. "Ready?" Jack looked down at his daughter, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. "Ready." The wooden doors opened, and father and daughter stepped into the chapel's main aisle. The small congregation stood, turning to watch them. Jack recognized faces from the Veterans Program, Claire's employees who had become friends, and even some of the youth they'd mentored together. Emma guided him forward with gentle confidence, her presence anchoring him just as it had through all his difficult years as a single dad. The morning light caught her brown hair, so like her mother's, and Jack felt a bittersweet ache of joy. His little girl was helping him start a new chapter. At the altar, Claire waited in a simple ivory dress, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She'd chosen to forego the traditional white wedding gown, saying this day was about authentic love, not pageantry. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, a few soft curls framing her face. When she saw Jack in his full dress uniform, her hand flew to her mouth, just as Emma had predicted. Jack and Emma reached the altar steps. Emma squeezed her father's arm one last time, then placed his hand in Claire's. "Take care of each other," she whispered, stepping back to take her place as bridesmaid. The chaplain, a veteran himself with silver hair and kind eyes, smiled at the couple. "Friends and family," he began, his voice warm and steady, "we gather today to witness the union of two hearts that found each other through courage, trust, and healing." Jack couldn't take his eyes off Claire. The woman who had seen past his scars, who had challenged him to live again, stood before him with such love in her eyes that his chest ached with happiness. "Claire and Jack have chosen to write their own vows," the chaplain announced. "Claire?" Claire took a shaky breath, squeezing Jack's hands. "Jack Miller, when I first saw you at that fundraiser, I recognized something in you. Not brokenness, but strength, waiting to be renewed. You taught me that real courage isn't about being fearless, but about facing our fears with an open heart. You and Emma have shown me what family truly means." Her voice wavered. "I promise to stand beside you through all battles, seen and unseen. To remind you every day that your scars are badges of honor. To love you completely, scars and all." Jack blinked back tears, overwhelmed by her words. The chaplain nodded encouragingly. "Jack?" "Claire." Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "I came home from war thinking I was too damaged to love again. But you saw me, really saw me, when I couldn't even see myself. You gave me purpose when I felt lost, hope when I felt hopeless." He glanced at Emma, who was beaming through her tears. "You didn't just love me, you loved my daughter. You helped make us whole again." He steadied himself. "I promise to trust in our love, even when fear whispers doubts, to be your partner in all things, to show you every day that you are my hero too." The chaplain produced 2 simple gold bands. "These rings represent your unending commitment to each other. Claire, please repeat after me." They exchanged rings with trembling fingers, the metal warm against their skin. The chaplain's voice rose with joy. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Jack cupped Claire's face gently in his hands and kissed her. The congregation burst into applause, many wiping away tears. Emma rushed forward to embrace them both, and they held her close, now truly a family. The afternoon light poured through the stained glass, bathing them in colors of hope and promise. Veterans stood at attention, offering silent salutes. Claire's employees cheered. And in that moment, surrounded by their community, Jack and Claire's love shone like a beacon of healing for all who witnessed it. The autumn breeze rustled through the golden leaves as a crowd gathered outside a renovated brick building in downtown Millbrook. A large banner stretched across the entrance read, "Warriors, Family's Hope Center, where healing happens together." The morning sun cast long shadows across the fresh landscaping, where dozens of people stood, chatting, many in military uniforms, others in business attire, and families with children scattered throughout. Jack Miller stood at the podium, his silver-flecked hair neatly trimmed, wearing a crisp navy suit that Claire had helped him pick out. The scars on his face caught the sunlight, but for the first time in years, he didn't try to angle away from the cameras. Instead, he stood tall, one arm around his wife Claire, the other around Emma, who had grown even taller in the months since the wedding. Claire looked radiant in a cream-colored blazer, her professional demeanor softened by the gentle way she squeezed Jack's hand. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she surveyed the crowd, a mix of corporate donors, veteran families, and community members who had all come together to support their vision. Emma, now 14, practically bounced with excitement beside them. She wore a yellow sundress and held the large ceremonial scissors beaming at the red ribbon that stretched across the entrance. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a neat braid, and she kept stealing glances at her dad, noting how relaxed his shoulders looked compared to that first fundraiser where everything had begun. "Welcome, everyone," Jack began, his voice steady and warm. "A year ago, I couldn't imagine standing here. I was a broken man hiding from the world, thinking my scars defined me." He paused, looking at Claire. "But someone taught me that scars are just the marks left by healing." Claire stepped forward to the microphone. "This center represents more than just a building. It's a promise to every veteran and every family member who's carried the weight of service." Her voice carried across the courtyard. "Here, no one walks alone. When my dad came home from war," Emma spoke up, her young voice clear and confident, "we didn't know where to turn. Now other families will have a place." She grinned at the crowd. "And trust me, if my dad can find hope again, anyone can." Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. Jack playfully ruffled Emma's hair, and she ducked away, giggling. The center itself stood as a testament to both Claire's business acumen and Jack's understanding of veterans' needs. The first floor housed counseling rooms with soft lighting and comfortable seating. The second floor contained classrooms for job training and support group meetings. A children's play area occupied one wing, filled with bright colors and therapeutic toys. The basement held a gym specifically designed for adaptive sports and physical therapy. As Jack looked out at the gathered crowd, he recognized faces from every chapter of his journey. There was Dave from his old support group, now a volunteer counselor. Sarah from Claire's board of directors, who had become one of their strongest advocates. Even his old commanding officer had flown in for the occasion. "This center," Jack continued, "was built on a simple truth. Healing happens in community. Every room, every program, every detail was designed with one goal: to help warriors and their families find their way back to each other." Claire stepped closer to the ribbon, guiding Emma into position with the scissors. "When Jack and I married, we promised to turn our story into hope for others. Today, that promise becomes brick and mortar, programs and possibilities." Emma held the scissors steady, waiting for the signal. Jack noticed her hands weren't shaking like his had at that first fundraiser. His daughter had grown so much, not just in height but in confidence. She had been right all along. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't surviving war, but choosing to live fully afterward. The crowd pressed closer as Claire raised her hand. "On behalf of the Warriors, Family's Hope Center, we declare this space officially open to all who seek healing, hope, and community." Emma squeezed the scissors, and the red ribbon parted with a satisfying snap. Applause erupted from the crowd, along with a few whoops and hollers from the veterans present. Jack pulled both Claire and Emma into a tight hug, his heart full. As the applause died down, Jack returned to the microphone one last time. Looking out at the faces before him, some scarred like his, some bearing invisible wounds, some carrying the worry of loving someone who served, he felt a deep sense of purpose. "Scars tell stories," he said, his voice strong and clear. Hours tell one of hope. The early morning sun painted streaks of pink and orange across the sky as Jack Miller sat on his front porch, warming his hands around a steaming cup of coffee. From inside the house, the sound of Claire and Emma's laughter drifted through the screen door, mingling with the cheerful chirping of birds welcoming the new day. Jack took a slow sip, savoring the rich aroma and letting his gaze drift across their neat front yard. The roses Claire had planted were beginning to bloom, adding splashes of red and yellow to the landscape. Emma had helped her plant them, the two of them working side by side while Jack watched from this very spot, his heart so full it had nearly burst. Through the screen door, he could hear them preparing breakfast. The familiar clinking of plates and the sizzle of bacon created a comforting symphony of domestic life, something he'd never thought he'd have again after returning from war. "Dad," Emma called from inside. "Your pancakes are getting cold." Jack smiled, remembering countless mornings of burnt toast and cereal before Claire came into their lives. Now, their kitchen was always filled with delicious smells and warm conversation. More importantly, it was filled with love. He closed his eyes, letting the morning sun warm his face. His thoughts drifted to that fateful night at the fundraiser when he'd broken down on stage. Back then, he'd felt like a failure, a broken man with nothing left to give. The memory of Claire's lone applause still echoed in his mind. That single act of faith that had changed everything. The sound of Emma's laughter pulled him from his thoughts. Through the window, he could see his daughter demonstrating some new dance move while Claire attempted to copy her, both of them dissolving into giggles when Claire stumbled. The sight made his chest tighten with emotion. His coffee had grown cold, but Jack hardly noticed. He was too busy marveling at how different everything was now. The nightmares that used to plague him had grown fewer and farther between. The scars that once made him feel like an outcast had become badges of honor, reminders not just of what he'd survived, but of how far he'd come. The Warriors, Family's Hope Center, was thriving, helping other veterans find their way back to life just as he had. Every time he walked through those doors and saw families healing together, he felt a deep sense of purpose. Claire had helped him transform his pain into something beautiful, something meaningful. A gentle breeze rustled the American flag hanging from the porch column. The same flag that had once seemed like a painful reminder of all he'd lost. Now it filled him with pride, not just for his service, but for the life he'd built afterward, the life he'd almost been too afraid to accept. Jack watched a pair of cardinals hop across the lawn, remembering Emma's words that had shaken him awake. "Don't let your scars win." His brave, wise daughter had seen what he couldn't back then, that his biggest battle wasn't with his past, but with his fear of the future. The morning light caught his wedding ring, sending a small sparkle across the porch railing. He twisted it gently, remembering the day Claire had slipped it onto his finger in that small veterans' chapel. Emma had walked him down the aisle, both of them crying happy tears. Claire had looked like an angel in her simple white dress, her eyes filled with a love he'd never thought he'd deserve. Inside, he could hear Claire and Emma setting the table, their voices warm with affection as they called for him to join them. The smell of coffee and pancakes wafted through the screen door, along with a promise of another beautiful day with his family. Jack stood slowly, taking one last look at the sunrise. The sky had transformed from pink to a brilliant blue, much like his own transformation from darkness to light. His coffee cup was empty now, but his heart was fuller than he'd ever imagined possible. Standing there on the porch, Jack felt the weight of his journey, from broken soldier to beloved husband and father, from survivor to thriver. The morning light caught the dew on the grass, making everything sparkle like diamonds, and he felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. "For the first time," he whispered, "I'm not surviving, I'm living." With those words hanging in the crisp morning air, Jack turned and stepped inside to join his family, leaving behind the shadows of his past and walking into the warm light of love and hope that now filled his days. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Miller, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.